Good morning. Thank you all for joining us today. This is our 9th edition of Career Ed Talks, and today we are focused on the career field of government and public administration. I'm going to do a very quick screen share. So these are our panels that we've had so far. Like I said, this week we are on government and public administration. We do have a YouTube channel. It's CTE, Lee County CTE. So if you're interested in viewing all of the other recordings, you're welcome. Thank you to the school district, the Foundation for Lee County Public Schools, and the Future Makers Coalition for coming together to prepare these career ed talks. So government and public administration, here are some of the jobs that you could possibly have, students. You could be a federal government worker, a budget director, the mayor, city manager. So these are kind of their median salaries that you can anticipate to make if you were in one of these career fields. And as for the state of Florida, these are the courses that we offer. Right now in Lee County, we actually do not have either of these in our high schools, but these are possible courses that you could be taking. So these are middle school courses, high school courses, and then if you wanted to move on to get your certificate, you could get a certificate in public works, and then the degrees that you could possibly get are down here, mostly dealing with management. Can everyone see that on my screen? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop share and we will move into our panel portion. So thank you, first of all, to all of the panelists for taking time out of your busy days to spend 45 minutes to an hour with us and with our students. And I'm going to go around and just kind of ask you to introduce yourselves. We do have 4 panelists today. Cheryl Verhulst is with Lee County Government. She is a senior administrative specialist. Josh Ittenbach is also with Lee County Government. He is a GIS coordinator. We have Michael Naschef, who is the Director of Government Relations for Lee Health. And we have Bill Jones, who is with Waste Pro as a division manager. So Cheryl, we'll start with you. If you can just kind of tell us a little bit about your background, maybe your education, the path that you took to get to where you are, and what a senior administrative specialist does.
So my path towards working in government was a very indirect path. When I was in high school, I knew without a doubt that I was going to work for the FBI someday. Like that's what I was going to do, or be a U.S. Marshal. So I ended up enlisting in the Marines straight out of high school, and I served as military police. And I did that for 4 years. And then I was like, you know what? I don't think I want to do that. It's actually not as fun or as glamorous as I thought it would be. So I kind of had a bit of an identity crisis, since that's what I had planned my life around. And I went to school. I got my undergrad in counseling psychology, because then I was thinking, well, you know, I still want to help the public in some capacity. I want to help leave the world a better place. So I went into that. And then I realized, you know, I really don't like talking to people that much either. So that's probably not going to work out. And I ended up working in nonprofits. So I got a position with the Harry Chapin Food Bank as an AmeriCorps volunteer. And that's when I was like, okay, wow, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to do something for the community. I'm not really working with the people who need help directly, but I'm doing things behind the scene that helps make this giant organization move forward. So how do I do that? So I went from there to a couple of other nonprofits, including the Foundation for Lee County Public Schools. And through the foundation, that's when I really learned about public policy and public advocacy. So I decided to pursue my master's, and I ended up obtaining my master's in public administration and public policy from the University of Southern California, so for School of Public Policy. So during that time, I ended up applying for various positions with the county, and I couldn't quite, the positions that were available at the time either required a master's or so many years of experience working directly with government, which I didn't I didn't have the experience, so I had to rely on the masters. And so I ended up becoming hired through the library system as a senior administrative specialist. They basically created the position for me because the director decided she really liked me and they needed help with projects, various special projects, and they also needed someone that was flexible, that could work well independently and also work well with a bunch of other different people. So I needed all of those soft skills that you might hear a lot about in school now to be able to help me do that, as well as a rounded understanding of how bureaucracy works and what goes into drafting policy and evaluating programs. From there, I ended up kind of getting loaned out to different departments. So even though my title is Senior Administrative Specialist, what I have ended up doing for the past year and a half is work as a policy analyst / performance management. So I've worked for county administration with the county manager's office, evaluating and drafting our COVID cares response, performing organizational audits of dependent special districts, drafting other housing policy plans, as well as my normal work with the county. So the beautiful thing about working with Lee County and some of the smaller governments is you really have the opportunity to go around to different departments and organizations and help out. And as long as you're flexible, as long as you work well with others and you set yourself up as someone that's reliable, you really have an opportunity to do more than just one job. And that keeps you really engaged.
Awesome, thank you. I think you have a lot of points that we've talked about in prior panels as well, is that you may have one thing in mind that you want to be when you grow up, and then that might change as you go along your path. So I think a better question to ask our students is not what do you want to be when you grow up, but what do you want to try first? Because it probably will change many times throughout their lives. Let's go ahead and go to Josh. Can you kind of give us a little bit of background on you, where you went to school, what degree you have, and what a GIS coordinator does in the Lee County government?
Sure. So my path was also pretty indirect. I'm a local, grew up here in Lee County, ended up going to the University of Central Florida right out of high school, didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I took a few years off and I'm going back, got my associates in drafting and design from what is now Florida Southwestern. Worked for an environmental consultant for a few years, making maps and other products for permitting. And then went back to school, got my bachelor's in environmental studies from Florida Gulf Coast, and worked as an ecologist for a few years, decided that chopping your way through the swamp every day is not as much fun as it sounds. And so around the time GIS is kind of changing a lot and going and more of the web-based direction with interactive mapping, and I really, I'd worked with it before, but not in that way, and it really just kind of clicked how powerful and useful the software can be. And so that's when I went back to work as a GIS technician with Collier County, doing addressing work, assigning addresses and maintaining that data. And then I went as an analyst with the city of Fort Myers in community development, and now to Lee County. And so GIS is geographic information systems. We do deal with any location-based data. So any, typically this is used in maps and mapping. Our department is in the innovation and technology. And so we maintain all of the databases for the county for any geographic information. So we have, it could be a number of things. We have a lot of physical assets. Utilities has all the pipes, sewer and water pipes in the ground. We've got our transportation department has every single sign, street light. All of those items are stored in a GIS database, and they use software to track the life of those items. there's also other data sets like zoning and planning, land use type of information that is not a physical asset, but we need to maintain a record of, the zoning category and for those properties. So we kind of do the behind the scenes type of work like that. And basically being kind of a central in IT, my role is more of assisting other departments and other users that may not have staff that are GIS specialists on their own. So I help them set up web maps and applications and stuff like that.
Awesome, thank you. Let's go over to Michael. Same questions, background, degrees, certificates, and what you do on a daily basis as the Director of Government Relations for Lee Health.
Sure, Kelly. So good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you. As Kelly said, my name is Michael Naschef. I'm Assistant Director of Government Relations for Lee Health. I've been with the health system for going on 5 years now. Before that, I worked as a legislative assistant in the Florida Senate and a policy aide for a former state senator from our area, Garrett Richter, and I started doing that job right out of school. So my degree is in political science. I have a bachelor's from Florida Gulf Coast University with a minor in history. So I always had an affinity for history and political science, and I knew I wanted to be involved in the space. And speaking of flexibility, I graduated in 2010. And in 2010, this is before y'all's time, but some of the folks on the call will remember the economy wasn't the greatest. So I had planned to go to law school in 2010, but an opportunity presented itself, and I made myself available to it to interview for a job for a state senator. I wasn't sure at the time if I was qualified, but something I would later learn is if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So you have to try and you have to put yourself out there and give it a shot. So at 22, I started working for the Florida Senate, and every year I would travel to Tallahassee, where I am right now, advocating for our district. So Senator Richter's district ran from Marco Island to Cape Coral at the time. I had managed his Lee County office, and I got to start cutting my teeth, as it were, on writing public policy and helping him to pass it. My time with Senator Richter as a mentor and as a friend really taught me a lot in life about experience and how to really put hard work to work. The old saying that luck is when skill meets opportunity. You have to be able to work through the challenges in front of you and solve problems. So my degree experience is, or my education background is, I only have a bachelor's degree. I'm fond of saying that Ronald Reagan had a bachelor's degree from Eureka College and he got to be president. So imagine what we can do with one from Florida Gulf Coast University. I'm the chair of the Alumni Association at the university. I'm now going into my second term at that. I met my wife at Florida Gulf Coast. She works there now. We have 4 kids, all one a little bit older, but 3 really little ones. So I'm always tired. That's why I generally look like I do right now, which is tired. But I'm really grateful for all of those blessings and the hard work I get to do. For the health system, Lee Health is it's a very large institution. So you all, I'm sure you've seen the hospitals, maybe Golisano Children's Hospital or Health Park Medical Center, or Gulf Coast Medical Center. Lee Health has more than 14,000 employees. It's a $2.2 billion annual organization. We have 2 million patient contacts a year. It's a big institution. And so 78% of that is dependent on what we call government-sponsored care, Medicare and Medicaid. 100% of what happens in healthcare is regulated by the government. You all know from civics that you have a president, a Congress, and a Supreme Court. In Florida, we have essentially the same thing with a governor, a Supreme Court, and a bicameral legislature. So my job for the health system is to represent them in front of these elected bodies and try to secure good public policy and appropriations to continue those operations to make sure that the system can deliver good care. So a lot of what I do is spend time on the road thinking of good strategies on how to ask really nicely for resources. And that's me.
So interesting. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Bill Jones is with Waste Pro. and he is a division manager. So Bill, if you could give us a little bit of background, education, degree, and what you do on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Well, first off, thanks for the opportunity to speak today. We really enjoy doing these types of events. So I'm originally from California, so I'm transplanted here to Florida. I have a degree in international marketing from California State University of Fullerton, which is a school primarily known for baseball, quite frankly, which is kind of cool. So we don't have any presidents though, but got a couple of actors and a few good baseball players, so it's not a bad place. So I've been in the industry since 1988, in the solid waste and recycling industry. I actually got started after graduating from school with my degree. I went into sales, outside sales, and it was fun, but it wasn't really me. Didn't match my personality. I don't think it's what I thought I wanted to do, but it turned out to maybe not be what I wanted to do or what I was very good at. So I had an opportunity to get into the waste business, and that opportunity came by way of a person that I went to college with, somebody that I had night classes with in my final year, as I was finalizing my degree. And this person, we kept in touch, and he called me one day and said, we've got a job opening. I'm reading the job description, and it sounds like it's you. Would you come talk to us? And I did. And my first job in the industry was actually what is referred to as a route auditor. And a route auditor is the person that rides in the truck and just confirms service levels. And you've got a list of customers. You're making sure they all get taken care of that day, that they're paying for their service, just things like that. And so I kind of learned the business that way and progressively moved up throughout the industry and worked for a couple of big companies. And now I'm in Florida working for Waste Pro, which is a privately owned company, and still in the same industry, but just a kind of a different mindset versus the publicly traded companies. We focus a little bit more on customer service and taking care of employees here than I think some of the public companies do. So a little bit different bend on it. What I do here is I'm in charge of our Fort Myers, Lee County facility, roughly 230 employees. It's the largest facility that Waste Pro operates. From here, we provide services throughout Lee County, Estero area, up through North Fort Myers. We also service the city of Cape Coral from this facility. We run about 127 trucks a day out of here. Most of those trucks have one person on them. Some have two, depending on what they're picking up and what area they're in. An average day, here, I'm ultimately in charge of everything that happens here. So I work with customers. I'm in charge of the sales efforts to bring on more customers. The maintenance portion of the business, we have about 20 folks that work on our trucks, primarily overnight when the trucks are in the yard and available. I'm in charge of the operations, which is getting all the drivers together, getting them properly trained, getting them out onto the route, taking care of customers, getting them back at the end of the day. In charge of the customer service side of it, which is the phones, the billing side, the accounting side. So really just the entire business here sort of works through me at some point. And then I report directly to the chief operating officer of the company out of Stanford, which is up near Orlando. So we're Florida based. So that's kind of what I do and what my day looks like. And of course I get to do fun things like this every once in a while.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's go into some more specific questions. First of all, one of the feedback that we have gotten from students is that they like to hear stories. So I'm going to put all of you on the spot. If you can think of a funny story or something super interesting that has happened to you throughout your career. Does anyone have something that jumps to the front of their mind that wants to go first?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. So our students really like to hear stories, like something funny that's happened to you or an experience you had that was like, you know, a light bulb went off, some sort of interesting story that has happened to you within your career.
I can jump in with a funny short story. I love a good anecdote. So this doesn't really have anything to do with the progression of my career, but it's a funny story about being on your feet and having good humor. So when I worked in the Florida Senate for Senator Richter, at one point we were having a Senate majority event at Senator Richter's home. And so a bunch of other senators from around the state came down to have this event and to raise money and to have a dinner together. And so they allowed us to invite some people from the community. And one of the individuals that came along, or two of them, were my parents. So Senator Richter allowed my parents to join for the event. And at this event, everyone's mingling and talking. And at one point, I happened to glance over and I noticed my parents were talking to the incoming Florida Senate president, who at the time was Don Gates. For those that don't know, legislative staff or at-will employees mean you can be fired for any reason. They don't have to have cause. So, you know, when your mom is talking to the Senate president, you worry a little bit about what she could be saying and what that might mean. So I happened to walk over and they were laughing very genially. And my mom said, Senator Gates said to my mom, you know, Michael is doing a great job for Senator Richter in the Senate, and you should really be proud. He turned out well. And my mom, without missing a beat, said, well, Senator Gates, that's because I hit him a lot when he was younger and he started to listen eventually. Senator Gates, without missing a beat, smirked and said, well, you know, I smacked my son Matt every time and again, and he didn't turn out as well. For those that don't know, Matt is now a congressman from Northwest Florida, so it was all taken in good humor. And, you know, in that moment, you just have to know how to roll with the jokes and understand that we're all in it to do good work, but sometimes you have to have fun and good humor. So that's my funny story for the day.
Awesome. Thank you. And very good points. I mean, you got to have a little bit of humor and take it as it comes. Bill, Josh, Cheryl, any funny, interesting stories? Cheryl, I see you unmuted.
Yes, so mine is more, I mean, I would say it's less funny, but it's more about how you never know who's watching and who's paying attention to what you do. So I was filling in, the county has something called e-rolls, which is your emergency role whenever the county is declared in a state of emergency. Normal role, a shelter manager. However, we weren't planning for a pandemic, so there was a lot of kind of tweaking as we go, and I was filling in county administration as just one of the customer service reps in addition to my normal jobs. Well, one day we had a very irate individual call in who was extremely upset with someone from Parks and Rec and Sports Development because he was trying to set up a volleyball tournament. And he, for some reason, you know, because of the pandemic, everything was shut down, and he was really upset about it. So very, very descriptively on the phone, he started issuing death threats against this individual. And then he hung up and then he called again and he did the same thing. And I think about the fourth time, I was able to keep him along on the phone. And the entire time I was talking to him, I was trying to be as apologetic about the situation as possible while talking him down, while also looking up his phone number and his information. So I could file a report and getting as many details as possible. So as soon as I got done with the phone, I was like, okay, well, I think I need to take this seriously. So what I ended up doing was contacting the gentleman's supervisor and the assistant county manager that oversaw his department and filed a police report. Apparently word of this got up to the county manager. Our county manager for Lee County is Robert Desjardins, and then some assistant county managers. And the way I handled it, which was to not panic, to not blow up and make a big deal out of it, but just kind of, okay, this is what I need to do and take it in strides, really caught their attention. And because I managed to handle a situation that may have stressed out a lot of individuals and really caused a lot of drama, because I handled it so well, they ended up basically poaching me and brought me up to the 4th floor. And then from there, that's when I had the opportunity to create the Lee County's 2021 legislative agenda, in addition to some other neat projects, which had it not been for that opportunity and how I'd handled it and from what people had seen, I never would have had that opportunity. And honestly, that was one of the most enjoyable moments of my life. Now, granted, I also learned a few other things, like you could create the perfect legislative agenda and then some wild things happen, like your representative says they're not going to ask for appropriations that year, and then you wonder why you spent all that time doing it. But it's I think an important lesson to keep in mind that you never know who's watching and who's paying attention. Like I never would have thought it would have got that sort of attention. I was just doing my normal job. So even if you think there's no way someone could find out what you're doing at work, it's always important to be mindful of how you're conducting yourself, even if you think you're behind closed doors.
Very, very good point. And what a good way to turn what could have been, a not so good situation into something that worked out very well for you. Josh, Bill, anything you want to add?
Well, this is Bill. I think I told the story a little bit about how when I got out of college, I went into sales, which is in theory what my degree is in, right? International marketing. And so my parents were, of course, very excited about that. When I ended up leaving that sales position and going to work for the garbage company in Southern California, when I told my mom, her first comment to me was, "Then why did you get a degree?" And I told her, I said, "Mom, because I have a degree, I get to be the guy that rides on the outside of the truck," which obviously isn't correct, but I thought that was kind of humorous, and she laughed about it. And I said, it's a job. It's a great job. It's a good opportunity. And of course, as we sit here all these years later, it's worked out great. But at the time, she was very concerned that I'd gone to school just so I could work for a garbage company. So you just never know where you're going to end up, right?
Right. All right, let's go. Dr. Hanrahan, do you have any students right now? Oh, you're muted.
Told you. Not with me now, no.
Okay.
I'm on my planning period, so there's no kids with me.
Okay. Well, feel free to jump in if you have any questions.
Okie doke. I don't have questions. I have an interesting story. I think it's interesting.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead and share.
Before I began this career, I practiced law for a long time in Ohio, and I was trying a case, I was in the middle of a case, and there was a fellow on the other side. It was a divorce case, and the man was not happy with me. And because part of that job is to try to get people off when you're questioning them, to get them off their guard or upset so that you can make points with the court that you want to make. I was needling him. I didn't violate any laws or any rules, and I wasn't being unkind, I didn't think, but he took affront with what I was saying. And we were sitting on opposite sides of one table because it was a cramped little hearing room. And if as you see me, pretend I'm the judge, to my right is the man and his lawyer. To the left, I'm sitting there with my client, but we were kitty corners. So the man was sitting directly in front of me. And I asked him a question that he really felt affronted by. And his reaction to it was to come across the table, literally leaping at me, grab me by the throat. And I was in a chair and he pushed me over backwards. And during a court hearing, there's someone there called a court reporter who types everything that's going on. And I wanted to make sure that everybody knew what was happening. So instead of screaming help or yelling or something like that, I started yelling, "Let the record reflect that Mr. Creamy is trying to throttle plaintiff's counsel." And as I'm going over backwards in my chair with this guy with his hands around my throat, and he was a big guy, I was a kid then and was scared. I can see out of the corner of my eye, the judge is leaving the bench and leaving the courtroom. The bailiff is standing there thinking, I'm not sure what to do. My client is leaving out the door of the courtroom, and it was me and Mr. Creamy. Unfortunately, it resolved all right. I survived, he survived. But the point of that is that people think that some professions are really boring and, I wouldn't want to do that. How you could do that? Why would you want to do that? As the other members of this panel have said, you never know what the future is going to bring or never know what a career path is going to open up for you, including maybe being physically attacked. But any career can be exciting and since I have the floor, one more thing. My suggestion to all the students who are watching or listening to us, or we'll see this later, I think what you need to do, and based on my experience, is find what you're passionate about. Because if you want something to do in your life, and you're not going to decide it right now at 18, but when you do make that decision, you want to be in a position that every morning when you get out of bed, you're going, all right, here's what I want to do today. Not, oh, I have to go to work today. When you find that, start thinking that way, you'll know that that's something about which you're passionate, and you're going to be very pleased with that career path. Done. Thanks.
Thank you. That was actually the perfect segue into my first question, which is, what were you passionate about and how did you incorporate that into your career? So let's start with Josh.
I really, I like making visual products. I think communicating through maps, and when I kind of realized that you can do all kinds of cool analysis and display the information in a way that really enlightens people and they can, get it right away, is really cool. And I really like having, open information, being able to share and make public all these, different data sets that are kind of hidden behind places and make them public and easy to find and easy for the public to use is, I think, really cool. And one of the things I really like to do.
Awesome. Cheryl, what are some of your passions and how, as you take a drink of water, what are some of your passions and how do you incorporate that into your career?
So Kelly, as you probably know from our years working together at the foundation, I'm big on research. I love nerding out over scholarly journals and articles and kind of picking apart and figuring out, okay, how can I find the primary source for this information versus secondary source, and then analyzing it. I know a lot of people are like, what's wrong with you? But I get really excited doing analysis and I love spreadsheets. And I also really enjoy working with Josh and some of the other people on the GIS team in finding different ways to analyze information. And that's something I get to do on a daily basis with my job. And I can just completely lose track of time, what I'm doing, just getting involved with that process. And then knowing that the analysis I'm coming up with is going to help residents of Lee County in some capacity. You may not see the results right away, but I know that it's going to make an impact, and knowing that I can help the community and I get to help the average citizen, whether it's keeping their water on, their trash picked up, and the lights on. That's what excites me every day about my job.
Bill, what is something you're passionate about and how do you incorporate that?
I think there's a couple of things. One of the things I'm very passionate about is customer service and treating customers the way I would like to be treated if I was a customer. So I always try to instill that in our team and our people here, that you should really provide the service at a level that you would expect it at your home or your business or for your family. So I'm very focused on that. And the second thing that I really, really enjoy, and I find I enjoy it more as I've gone further in my career, is I really enjoy teaching people the business and kind of ingraining that customer service philosophy in newer people that are coming up through the ranks. And I take great pride in developing employees and seeing them be promoted and moved on and to do more in the business and with our company. And it's just a lot of fun to see that happen.
And Michael.
Thank you, Kelly. So when I was in school, honestly, when I was in high school, what I was passionate about was sports and my friends. And, I obviously, there wasn't an easy way to monetize that. I wasn't as great at football or wrestling as I would have liked to have been. So when I went to Florida Gulf Coast, I kind of had to figure what are the subjects I really enjoyed. And for me personally, that ended up being history and political science and a mixed geography. So I kind of like what Josh does and hearing how he actionalizes data in real time. That's pretty neat. So finding a way to put those things to work. I also got involved on campus, student government, and started a bunch of clubs and organizations. And fraternities and sororities. And as you do those things, as you gain life experience, it's really important to be great in the classroom and always put your best foot forward. As Cheryl and Pat had mentioned earlier, it's kind of like your shadow. Your shadow is always out in front of you. Your shadow is your reputation. It's always out in front of you before you go somewhere, and it's behind you after you leave. And generally in a digital world, people already know how they feel about you before they've even ever met you. So it's really important, certainly to actualize your passion, but also to make sure that you're representing that best version of yourself in all of your actions. And when you start doing all those things and you start learning about what it is you really like to do, finding that job that you get to do it is, it's not always easy, but eventually I promise you will get there if you keep up the hard work. When I left the Florida Senate in 2016, I did not plan to represent Lee Memorial Health System or Lee Health now. That was not my goal. But our former CEO, Jim Nathan, had really reached out and recruited me, and I was passionate about the organization and the work they do. And having the opportunity to go to work every day and represent someone that's doing good work is something that I encourage every one of us to do, to feel really good about your passion and your job.
Yeah, and I think that that's why we're all here today, is because we want students to find that sweet spot, to figure out what it is that they're passionate about, what they're good at, and what they enjoy doing, and finding a way to make money doing that. This kind of goes along with a little bit of what Michael had touched on, which is making sure that you're gaining those experiences. Put yourself out there, join clubs. When you get to college, join sororities and fraternities, and that's how you meet new people and you find new interests and you figure out what you're passionate about. What type of personality traits work well in your specific field and career? So let's start with Cheryl. What type of personality traits? I know you said that you kind of have a mix where you're out sometimes doing vaccines or COVID testing, but other times you are deep into some research.
Yeah, and it's a jack of all trades, master of none at Lee County. The key thing is flexibility with what I do. You have to be flexible, and you have to be able and willing to roll with the punches and do it with a smile on your face. That's the most important thing. Even if you're thinking, wow, this is kind of inconvenient, at the end of the day, at least for me, I'm still working my same hours more or less, and I'm still getting a paycheck. So that helps keep things into perspective. And it's going into it with a mindset of, I get to try something new, instead of, oh, wow, I don't know what I'm doing. This is so annoying. I was looking forward to eating lunch. And just having that positive mindset and that flexibility will carry you far in the world. And then on top of that, being able to handle stress. Well, there are times when, for example, I was loaned out to Human and Veteran Services to help come up with a housing plan with the new CARES funding. Sometimes you have months for projects, and other times it's like, okay, we need this white paper done by tomorrow. Or, hey, something happened at the vaccine site. We're going to need you over there in a couple hours. And you have to be able to just handle that stress, not blow up, take them all, be like, okay, all right, that's what I'm doing now, and roll with it. And additionally, I touched on this before, but working well with others is really important when it comes to government, especially local government. You are working with many different departments within the local government, and also with outside entities such as Lee Memorial, the State Department of Health, Waste Management, local nonprofits. It's really a collaborative effort for local government, local governance, I should say. So having that flexibility, having that ability to work with people who are very different from you is key to success.
Thank you. Bill, what do you think? What types of personality characteristics work well with your career?
Well, in my role, I work with a lot of different people, a very diverse employee group, diverse customer group, also interact with government officials, city officials, county officials, state officials. So interesting from that standpoint. So I think really to be successful in this industry and in this career, you really need to be approachable. You need to be proactive. You need to try to stay ahead of things. It's often difficult to do that, but from a regulatory standpoint, from contract compliance standpoint, and really just staying ahead of the curve in our market here with all of the seasonality of our customers. So I think you have to be a little proactive. You have to be very calm. I think you can't overreact. Really got to be thoughtful about your decision making and the impact it's going to have, not just on over 200 people and their families that work for you, but also the customers that we have. And we service over 150,000 residential customers here a week. So a poor decision could have a pretty significant impact. You really need to be thoughtful about your decisions. And I think you have to be very dependable. You got to be someone that's going to show up, someone that's going to be there, someone that's going to follow up. One of my favorite sayings to my employees when we're talking about customer service is you have to do what you say you're going to do. It's that simple. If I tell you we're going to do it, we're going to do it. If we make a mistake, we'll fix it. Easy enough to do. But if you don't follow through, that really causes a ripple effect in a customer's life and in an employee's life. So you really want to make sure that you're dependable and you follow up on what you say you're going to do. So I'd say those are probably the keys.
Very good advice. Josh, what types of personality traits work well with the type of work that you do?
Yeah, I'd say with GIS in general, you've got to be detail-oriented, working with data, comfortable with computers, technology, all that type of stuff. For my role, you've got to be able to work with others, like Cheryl was saying, collaborate, and because a lot of, I'll spend a lot of time, the people I'm working with know what they want, and I know what the software and what we can do, and so we have to kind of communicate to meet in the middle and find something that will work for them and solve their problems. So it's a lot of communication and collaboration to get to that point.
Awesome. And Michael, in your role, it seems like it's pretty social. You do a lot of networking, talking, speaking in front of people.
Yeah, great capture point. So to be good at this role, you need to have the what I would call a high EQ, emotional intelligence, the ability to read your audience, whether it's one person or a group of people or a legislature or a commencement speech you're delivering. All of those, the ability to look at someone's facial cues, to hear what they're saying, to really feel what they're feeling and be able to communicate back to them in a manner that resonates. So that ability, along with a good memory, or you can practice and improve on your memory. But for instance, when we talk about flexibility and a good memory and the ability to empathetically communicate with others, and you put those skill sets together. And so I'll transition from things like when Lauren Stillwell at the Lee County School District says we want to be able to actionalize doing tests for students in our schools, I can help by going to Roger at the county and going to Glenn and saying, here's the dollar threshold we need, here's the grant application. And then we can send Golisano nurses after working with them to be able to have rapid testing in Lee County schools, and then pivot because we need more vaccines in Lee County. So the county and the health system need to advocate the state and the federal government, and we need our touch points at HHS and CMS and FDA and everyone in between down to the state level in the governor's office, ACA, and the State Department of Health, and then pivot again because the local bill that I filed to change our enabling legislation with Representative Roach needs to get through a committee, and we need to sit down and work with the staff on issues pertaining to different areas of Florida statute and how the chapters overlap along with case law and how it all applies to their everyday life and understanding. So those are just some real life examples of taking EQ, flexibility, and a good memory and applying it to your roles.
And being able to pivot, right, from one thing to the other. Yes. Let me see. What is something that you learned in high school, some sort of skill that you learned in high school that you are still using to this day? Let's start with Bill.
Well, good question. I would say that in terms of school classes, math, things that you thought you would never need to know in math, turns out you do need to know. And I think English, writing and developing policies and training procedures and things like that. Proper English has been very helpful with writing those types of documents and reading them and editing them and making sure that they're understandable and clear, not only to our employees, but to customers or to outside agencies that come in and review our training, such as OSHA or DEP, a few other groups like that that may come in from time to time to talk to us. Other than that, I would say in terms of personal skills or interpersonal skills, probably the ability to get along with people. I heard some other folks on the call talk about reading people's faces, reading, cues, personality cues, things like that. I think that's important when you're dealing with a large workforce or a large customer base, being able to individualize your response and your training and your interactions based on some of those reads and those tells. So I think that's probably the main personality skill or personal skill that I picked up.
Thank you. Josh, what's something that you learned in high school, either academically or interpersonal skills that you still use?
I don't know about high school, but I know in college, every single class we had to do some sort of group project and presentation, and that those experiences are something that's translated into what I do now. So I would say that's kind of one of the main things.
Awesome. Michael and Cheryl, I'm going to change your question for the two of you. I'm going to ask you, what is something in each of your fields right now that would be available for high schoolers if they wanted to just kind of dip their toes in and see what it's like in your fields? Are there opportunities available? Is there something that high school students could do? And whoever, feel free to jump in.
Sure, Cheryl, while you're thinking about it, I'll jump in. So we have, speaking of reading facial cues, I could tell that Cheryl was working on it, so I'm just going to jump in. And at Lee Health, we have all sorts of different opportunities related specifically to the medical field. In my role specifically, I'm kind of the only one that does what I do. So it's I'm hoping to be able to expand that and bring on opportunities for interning in the relatively near future. But as it relates to working in government and learning these processes, so here in the Florida legislature, they have what's called the page and messenger process. Now this year with COVID, it's certainly slowed down, but that's actually a really great way into foraying into the state legislative process and learning about it. And so the way it works is you apply with a local legislator to be sponsored, so that for 1 week while you're in, I believe it's grades 8 through 12, depending on if you're in the House, you're younger, if you're in the Senate, you're a little bit older, and they let them come and run messages onto the floor. And so basically you're a runner in the legislature, and you kind of wear an official blazer, and you get to hear from all these elected officials in this really important setting and learn the process. And a lot of the folks I met along the way that started that way got involved, became legislative assistants and district secretaries, and eventually, they're representing other large entities like I am with Lee Health. I mean, their counterparts, most large private sector and public sector companies have a role that's a leader for government relations in an organization, and generally that person reports to your CEO. And so there are always ways to, as a high school student, to learn that process. And one easy way to get involved is paging in legislatures.
Thank you.
Okay, so I would say if a student is interested in public policy and public analysis specifically, the best way a student can get involved would be through volunteer opportunities. There isn't necessarily a direct path into it where someone can have an internship as a public policy analyst. That just isn't really something that exists. But getting involved with grassroots efforts and causes where you volunteer as an advocate in some capacity, that will get you familiar with the policy building process, the policy analysis process, and what goes, and then going into the other side of it, of what it takes to build a convincing argument so that those proposals can reach it to the floor, to the Senate floor. That would be my biggest advice. So whether it's, you know, volunteering with AmeriCorps or another civic organization, unfortunately, you won't be paid for it, but it's what can get your foot in the door and build that reference and that experience.
Right. Sometimes experience is worth more than actually getting paid for it too. Something to add on to your resume, students. Well, we are about 8 minutes away from 10. I want to make sure that we're cognizant of our panelists' time. Last question to wrap it up. Same question we ask every week. If you could go back and tell your 15, 16-year-old self one thing, so something you have learned throughout your life and your experience, what would you go back and tell your high school self? And I will open it up to whoever would like to jump in first.
All right, I'll start with that one. Don't take things so personally. That took me a few years to learn, but that's the main thing. You just because you perceive something to mean a certain way doesn't mean your interpretation of it is correct. So I would say be mindful of that. Stay away from boys. That's the most important one. They're a distraction. And pay a little bit more attention in that statistics class because it is like I have to use statistics every day. So I thought I was never going to use it growing up, and here I am using it almost every day.
Great advice. Thank you.
So I'll jump in. 3 of my 4 children are daughters, so Cheryl's advice is right. Stay away from boys. I reaffirm that. It's totally true. Outside of that, what I would tell my 15-year-old self is that as you go, remember, and this goes back to the empathy lesson, the sweetest words in the English language are someone's own name. That's a really short way of saying you have to remember the specifics of other people and that they have different life experiences. And as you're working with them, they're not always going to see things the same way. So you might feel like you are the most right person ever. You know you're right, and you have to make sure they know you're right. It's just not worth it. You never have to be that right, trust me. Eventually you all, I'm sure, or the majority of us will have spouses, and we're going to learn to, you know, and back to the stay away from boys lesson, we're going to have spouses, and we're going to have to work with that person, that partner throughout life. And so just know that it's never worth being right. The old adage is you can be you can be right or you can be happy, but you cannot be both. Choose to be happy.
Thank you. Josh or Bill?
I guess my one big thing when I was younger, you know, not really knowing what to do, was that lack of motivation made it hard to finish school, like in one setting. And I that would be one thing. It would make things a lot easier to just, you know, delay that gratification to later, finish school first, and then go on. But it still works out. But you know, it would have made things easier for my 15-year-old self.
Good point. And Bill?
Yeah, so that's a tough one, right? It's kind of reflective, I guess. But I think, you know, one of the themes that I've heard throughout this call, and I know is true with me, is you really just need to kind of buckle down and get through it all. You don't know what you don't know. When I was 15 or 16, I would have never thought in my life that I was going to be in the garbage business. I don't think I even knew there was such a thing as the garbage business. I just knew it went away, you know, on Tuesday mornings. You know, so you may have a thought of what you believe your future is going to be, or what college you're going to go to, or what it's going to look like. But just understand that things do change, and that you should be flexible and kind of understand that. So I think the advice I would give myself is, don't be so hard on yourself if things don't work out exactly the way you think it's going to work out. Just be prepared to be flexible, because there is something out there that's for you. You just got to find it.
Right, exactly. And just being open to those experiences.
Kelly, one last brief thought, just this one's important. Don't post anything on the internet or say anything out loud that you wouldn't want your mom to see. That's the easiest way to say it. Just don't post things on the internet.
Very, very good points. Yes, because people can, I mean, Google search is so easy. You can find so much about people. So be very careful what you put on the internet. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Josh and Cheryl and Michael and Bill, for joining us today, and for giving us a little bit of your background and your experience and lessons that you've learned. I appreciate having you here. Does anyone have any last words while I'm pulling up our flyer for next week? All right. Well, actually in 2 weeks, today was Government and Public Administration. On February 24th, we will be featuring health science careers. And thank you. I know Megan Daly is on the call, just kind of being a support there from Lee Health. So thank you to Megan for getting us some of our panelists. We're gonna have an awesome panel in 2 weeks. Thank you again to Josh, Michael, Cheryl, and Bill. And we will see all of you in 2 weeks. So have a great Wednesday.
Thank
for
you.
having us, Kelly.
Thank you.